one.
All right, welcome to tonight's edition of Firefighting Fridays. We are here with Strategic Fire Training. We've got Jeff Shupe, Jerry Knapp, Chad Gruver, John Mateer, and myself, Jeff Diederich. We're here to run down some of the myths and the facts when it comes to working off a standpipe. If you are in the business of going up to fight a fire, you're going to want to tune in and listen up to this one today. Jeff, can you start us off here? We're talking about standpipes. Step one, right? Step one for these departments that are going to be getting into this line of business and maybe haven't had anything taller than 4 or 5 stories before. They need to do an evaluation, right? Do they have the numbers to put on a firefight above ground?
Well, that's the interesting thing, because if you think a well-involved house fire is a problem with getting enough personnel, you get one of these buildings and it's be a disaster. Because if you're not getting a big number of people coming in initially, and your approach or your response is a piecemeal coming in, trying to plug guys in and telling them, let's just say, for example, if you got a fire on the 9th or 10th floor of a building and it's a good fire, you take a crew of firefighters coming in fresh who know nothing, maybe they're mutual aid or automatic aid or whoever they're from. And you say, hey, go up there and help those guys on the fire floor. And they get up there and they're not familiar with these types of operations. You're looking for big problems. So
company discipline could be a big issue if you're used to just house fires. Not that those are anything to be, I guess, take lightly, but some guys can get away with, some bad habits. They're on a ground level. They're within 10 or 12 feet of a door or a window at all times. When you're in a high-rise situation, you need to be disciplined and stick with your company, stick with that line, stick with your operation. Communications are a huge piece of it. What is the number one priority when you get a firefighting crew at a tall building that's on fire? What should everybody be thinking? Page one.
Is this out for everybody to comment on, or are you looking?
Well, I don't know. Give us a start here, and we'll let these
all
other
right.
guys
Well,
talk,
first of all, okay, so
you hit the mute. You tapped your mute there, Jeff. Start over. There you go, buddy. Oh.
Nope, you got it.
Okay.
There you
Am
go.
I back?
Yep.
You're back.
Okay.
Welcome back.
So some time ago, when I was still at a job, we were looking at rewriting our high-rise SOP in Cleveland, and the work that it took. And I called my one friend in Chicago, Kenny Wojtek, and I asked him, "What do you guys have for your SOP?" And he said, "Are you ready?" He says, "I'm going to send it to you," and it was like 54 pages long or something like that. I'll never forget that. And remember, when you're talking about a high-rise building, and it doesn't even have to be a high-rise building per se, like downtown Chicago or New York or someplace like that. No, you could have a mid-rise building. A building 75 feet or greater can represent a high-rise fire operation. And it's the type of materials that the buildings are built out of. And when you have things that don't react in a fire like they do in a house fire, well, you're talking about a different animal altogether. They used to talk about the heat sink, of concrete, steel, and metals and other masonry things that are found in a building. The heat stays in there and it doesn't vent out. So it's a very labor-intensive operation when your fire and the fire environment is eating up the guys, right and left. You get a short time on a bottle and down. You got to go change out and whatever. You got to have another crew to get in there and try to keep the line in operation if it's that kind of fire operation. So
that in that crew, you alluded to it, being mutual aid or automatic aid. Just a quick poll around here. If I go to a high-rise fire where I work, I'm going to have at least 5 communities coming in on an initial alarm for that building that's on fire. Most of us are used to working on the same radio channel. Okay, so that's one big
Yeah.
hoorah for us, but
Yes.
equipment familiarity is going to vary depending on who's working that day. How does it work in like larger operations? John, Cleveland, obviously you're going to have multiple companies coming in. What's the typical look? How many engine companies are getting together to put a line in service?
Initial line, at least 2, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
Get that initial line going.
2 engine crews, right?
We got 2
Yeah,
engine crews.
right,
That's what I was
yeah.
referring to.
Yeah.
We don't have to deal with the mutual aid, so we're kind of blessed in that regard. We all should know what we're doing, but 2 engine companies will get that first line going.
Yeah. And Jeff, you talk about that a lot when we go out and do these classes, and how there has to be a commitment from those first arriving crews to get at least 6 to 10 people, together to attack the fire initially. Get at least a couple companies together. Somebody has to be in charge inside to make those calls. It's super important.
Let me go back. Let me go back to a couple minutes here. One of the things we found out when we were doing that rewrite of the SOP was that we had to determine right away if we had a fire in that building or not. And so it was the first company on the scene. What would that first crew be expected to do? So let's say, like in your case, Jeff, you got a 10-story building, okay? And you have a reported fire. Okay, what type of alarm is it? Is it a verbal alarm, telephone alarm? Is it an automatic alarm signaling fire? So when your first crew gets there, what do you expect them to do? And we had a tough time. We were actually wrestling with that because, again, we looked around the country what other cities were doing, and they would say 1 engine, 1 ladder goes and finds the source of the alarm, and we'll determine if we got a fire. Well, here we had officers that said, wait a minute. If I got a crew on the scene, I expect them to go find it. Don't wait for that second crew, because time, everybody throws out the, I know better, attitude and so forth. But the thing is, you got to understand engines. Well, you would add an engine crew, take their hose packs with them and their standpipe kit with them in search of that fire, along with the first engine, or excuse me, the first ladder truck. So now you got 2 crews, and if you get up there and you do, again, start using your senses. Do you smell an actual working fire? Is it food in the stove or something like that? These are the things that, we were wrestling with, determining, is it a fire, and then what the location is. And then breaking it down from there. Where's the location of this fire within this building? Where's the closest stairwell? Because as the crews are coming in, whether it's a big city with other companies coming in, or whether it's automatic aid, or you're calling in mutual aid, you just can't have people coming in and assigning themselves and freelancing all over the place. So you have to have a central meeting point. And that was the thing about identifying fire, if it's a real fire or not, the location, stairwell, which is going to be used as the attack stairwell. And then if we're going to have have an evacuation, is there going to be an evac stairwell? So we were looking at all this stuff, putting that standpipe SOP together. And it is a resource game. So you can imagine, Jeff, as you brought up, here's a small fire department out in East Nowhere. And now they all of a sudden have 6, 8-story buildings going up in their locale. And many of them are sometimes still volunteer or combination departments. So you really don't know what the skill level is, what the knowledge level is. Probably in that case, they don't have any standpipe operations experience. And that's what makes it even more hectic operation, or can be. So,
Well,
yeah, you get.
I was going to say, Jerry, you could speak to the volunteer side and maybe not the new rapid growth that Jeff's citing there, but what is some of the things that kind of department can do to shorten up the reflex time when it comes to, there's a big tall building going in, how do we adapt to that? What are some of the initial planning things that can happen?
And we've done a couple things here in Rockland. Out of the 26 departments, probably 3/4 of them have at least one high rise. Like my department has a 4-story hospital that's pretty heavily occupied 24 hours a day. So we get in there a couple times a year and do the standpipe kind of exercise. What's interesting is the hospital doesn't let us flow water. So we're really sure that we can do it with dry hose, but we're not really sure we can do it with wet hose. So we've been pushing the hospital to, and I think that's a problem a lot of places have. You know, you can. I'm a planning guy, but if you don't get to do the full Megillah, you know, you're kind of hamstrung. But just a couple of things I want to point out, like as we get started here, is we're focused on the engine company part of this, and Shupe alluded to some of the things, but you know, is this a wind-driven fire? We're gonna be up where the wind is different, maybe than down below. The logistics, just getting guys air bottles. You know, how do you get those air bottles up to the staging floor? Jeff talked about the attack and the evacuation stairwell. So I'm not sure we're going to talk about those things tonight because we typically focus on the engine part, but there's all these other command and control parts that are the key that Jeff just kind of talked about.
All right. Well, this is part of I guess the first part about fighting the fire, you know, way above ground is having a plan and assessing what you have to work with as far as people. The next thing I would say is we got to talk about getting water into the building. A popular, I guess, opinion when I started in the business back in the late 1990s was pump to the floor of the fire. Not sure where that all started from in my area of the woods here, but after looking into it, reading some of the NIOSH reports and looking at some other incidents, that is not the way to go. Because it's just actually throwing in another variable. Pump that building, pump the system to one predetermined pressure where you know you're going to get the volume on any floor, and then have that crew adjust the pressure at the outlet. Seems to make a lot of logical sense, but that argument seems to keep going around just to pump to the floor. But Chad, you've been dealing with a lot of standpipes, you know, buildings coming up and going up quickly. Is your department prepared to just pump to the floor? Or are they pumping the building?
Well,
where are you guys at with it?
I started out learning the same way you did. We pumped to the fire floor. You know, so you're figuring, okay, this rounded up, it's a 20-story building. So I'm gonna, you know, add pressure. If I'm on 10, then I gotta pump to the floor below that one. And it just got really hard for drivers. I mean, it's a variable at 3 a.m. you don't want to have to factor in. And so started working with prevention. I read Oklahoma City's Standpipe. They actually have a really good standpipe high-rise policy in place. And I kind of did what y'all did and started going straight to the roof. Good news about our buildings is they're all really good standpipes. I mean, if it's in a parking garage, it's going to blow. It's not going to work. We're not using a standpipe. But if it's in a building, we have really good standpipes. They get tested pretty regularly. The PRVs are taken off, or if they are on there, we can break them off. And so we just started, you know, I figured out right now in Addison, I think our tallest building's 17 stories. So we did the math. You know, I just said, hey, put 175 in there right now. You know, go to the roof. That's the highest building. Drivers, if you forget, 175 is fine. If we're going to blow a standpipe, let's do it quickly. That way we can come up with plan B. And then with our low pressure hose system, we dial in, you know, and the way I try to teach the guys, and it's a shift because they all learn pump to the fire floor. And the way I try to teach it is like, the standpipe is my hydrant. And then what we're doing in the stairwell with our high-rise kit, that becomes the pump panel. So we're just moving that pump panel 8 stories up in the air.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And, you know, if your outlets are tested to you know, get at least 500 gallons a minute at a certain pressure, then that amount of pressure you're putting into the building should deliver that, which means you should be able to have 2 attack hose lines flowing at the same time with that amount of gallons per minute available. So what's next there, Jeff? I see you're interested in chiming in. What do you have?
Yeah, see, again, these were the old ways of doing business. You were a crackerjack department if you could come up with all these numbers. It just sounded so good. You know, what kind of pipe do we have in this standpipe operation here? What's the diameter of it and so forth? All that has changed from those times. And one of the things I was thinking about from a tactical standpoint, when they used to teach you to pump to the fire floor, well, how did you know how long your layout was? And the other thing was, this was all developed at a time when we didn't have a lot of walkie-talkies on the scene. So it wasn't like a guy at the standpipe outlet could get on his walkie-talkie and radio down to the pump operator, say, hey, increase our pressure, you know, and I'm looking at my gauges. You didn't have to have the standpipe gauges, you know? So all this stuff, once again, it gets entrenched or embedded in the fire service over time. And here we are trying to help modernize things and make the job better, safer, more efficient for firefighters. And you're fighting that fight because it probably started in their basic training school by people who just followed that same, what was in the book, and this is what the book says, and so forth. So that's how important it is to, and somebody mentioned earlier, one of you guys mentioned earlier about, you know, learning all the buildings in your district. It's an old thing in the fire service. Yeah. And that was the thing about keeping guys. When a guy came out of the academy, he went to a company and he stayed there. And in a lot of cases, the guys were expected to spend a large part of their career in that company. Learning the buildings, you know, was one of the things that was expected of you.
Yeah, no surprises in your first two. That's for sure.
Yeah.
We start walking them while they're being built. And
Yeah,
that way we know as they're going. Now, do you remember it at 3 a.m.? No. But, you know, you at least have a vague idea.
Let me piggyback on that, Chad. Whether it's 3 a.m. or 3 p.m., that can have a big impact on a building from just one thing, one simple thing, water.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you talk about the business time of the day, when
yeah.
water consumption is greater versus nighttime, you may have the water tonight, but it's a different fire situation because it's in blackout conditions. But during the day, maybe there's, you know, a drain on water, you know, that we need to get a hold of and pump it into the buildings. So, yeah. Once again, firefighting is circumstantial.
So part of that circumstance is when we're talking about pumping into the building.
Yeah.
Another very popular opinion is to just let that first in pump operator handle that chore of getting water from the hydrant into the pump and then from the pump into the building. Even initially when me and you started talking about this years ago, Jeff, I was a little surprised to hear you tell me with wide eyes, are you crazy? Put 2 pump operators on that job. It's that important. Well, you know, you don't do these high-rise operations very often. And then when you do, maybe you've gotten away with just having that single pump operator. So what are some of the historical or experience-based reasons to have those first 2 engine drivers collaborate for that job?
I'll tell you what, when you turn the corner in a narrow street in a downtown area, and you got fire showing on 2 floors right now, and the first engine goes to hook up to the Siamese, and the Siamese falls off the side of the building. You think you need a second pump operator help you?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
that's one example I could give you.
What are we dealing with?
Yeah, you want to talk about white eyes?
Yeah. That, just in case that ever happens, wouldn't you have to just run the hose in and pump the standpipe on the first floor?
That would be an option. But you see, here's the thing, you know, when you get a pump, when you get a fire, and an honest to God real fire, you know, in a standpipe operation, you should have 2 engines pumping the system. In your system, you hope by the code, all the plumbing is interconnected. Because we found, again, being an old city, you have older buildings. Jerry, I'm sure you have it, you know, in your area, older buildings where you just have a pipe running up a stairwell here, a pipe running up a stairwell here. They aren't interconnected. So this is the whole thing about what we talked about earlier. When that first crew goes up to locate and verify the fire location, what stairwell are we going to use for fire attack? They got to identify that. Is it the A, B, or C stairwell? And that would be our attack stairwell. Well, you might have to find the Siamese for that stairwell if it's not interconnected. And that's a very real fact for a lot of us older cities back east. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, along with the equipment, what are we taking up? I mean, this is where, and we see this all over the country. The majority, it seems to me, by observation of being around a lot of other fire departments over the last few years, the 1 3/4 with a combination nozzle or some variation of that seems to be what is usually available to the crews to use. And as much as we have been out there talking about it, and for as long as it has been documented in everything from FEMA reports to line of duty death reports to all the great guys that have that we're standing on their shoulders have said that right there, is that the Philadelphia report?
Yeah.
That a low pressure firefighting system with a smoothbore nozzle is not only convenient and works well, that it is absolutely necessary. So along with that is some kind of gauge that we could put on the pipe, right? So we have an idea of what we're actually seeing come through the system, whether it's an analog gauge or an inline flow meter, if you have the means. The equipment we're taking up, we're big proponents of the 2-inch line. We're big proponents of that 240, 260 gallons a minute via the 1/16 tip. How do we bring along the naysayers when they say, well, most fires are controlled with this 1 3/4? What is it that we need to show or say when it comes to that kind of a discussion? I mean, do we need to bring up that stack of papers you got right there, or Chad has something? Go ahead.
I couldn't find my raise hand button. So about 2 years ago, right after I started, or 3 years ago, right when I started traveling with y'all, I was a big 2.5 guy in high rise. You know, Matt Rush from Austin came in, hooked us up, got us all set up. We've always been fortunate. We had the gauges and everything, but when we became the quad cities, and I don't have mutual aid, I have automatic aid, and all 3 cities are coming if we have a big one. I got to saying, how is this going to work? Because we were the only ones using 2.5. You know, I think 3 of the cities were using 1 3/4 because they don't have high rises. I go, guys, but when we get to when we get to a fire in our district, y'all are going to be up there with us. And so I did a kind of a know your flow, show and flow thing. And I had a standpipe prop where I could pump into a standpipe. And I had each of the departments come out and flow their high-rise packs is what they called them. And a lot of them were just like, you know, the skid loads. They were taking the load off of the back of the engine for the bundle. And that's what they were taking up. And most of them, you know, hey, well, we're using 1 3/4 with a fog tip. You know, we think we should be getting 175. They're getting like 130. I put a flow meter on it. And then I showed the 2.5. And, you know, we were getting 265 out of ours. But, you know, fortunately, I'd been running with y'all for about a year when this happened. And I showed them 2-inch, because the big thing was, if we're using 2.5, you know, y'all are gonna have to bring reducers. We're gonna wipe out one whole standpipe with our line. And
Right.
The ability, when we switched over to 2-inch with 1.5 couplings, that brought the Y into play. Thank you, Mr. Shupe. And so now, you know, whether or not I go up with my 200 feet, my high-rise kit, put the Y on there, put the pressure gauge, dial it in, I have a line. Whether they come up with 2-inch or 1 3/4, you know, I'd rather them come up with 2-inch. We usually grab the other engines and take their hose pack up. But we brought the 1.5 couplings into play, so other cities could tag off of us without having to go a floor below.
2 floors below.
2 floors below, a floor below where we were.
And let's, you know, you mentioned the why. I kind of look at the standpipe as a gigantic gated Y, you know, so for somebody that may be apprehensive about using such a thing and considering the hydraulic balance act and yeah, it's there, but this is the circumstance in which we are fighting fire. It is what it is. You know,
It's the only thing you have, only device you have to bring water up to where you need it. It's all. That's it.
right.
So get to know it, and so you're not afraid of it. And so you can attach a Y to it. You're going to get plenty of water out of it. And look at the way the standards have been changed recently since the Philadelphia fire, to allow for greater flows at higher pressures and so forth, and the 2-inch line, as you guys are talking about, especially with the 1.5-inch coupling with the Y, put a gauge on it. Okay. Put a gauge with the flow meter on it. I don't care what you do. Show yourself how easy it is. And the mobility you got with the 2-inch line and so forth and the firepower, and you can get those flows and have a more mobile attack line.
Yeah, certainly makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't even start looking at it until I ran into y'all, and I was all 2.5, and we were using an 1.8-inch tip. And I hate to say it, but I know if you put it in the formula, it's like 235 on the 1.16 on the Shupe tip. It's an 1.16. I think it's a 235 is the exact flow, but I've never seen it go that low.
No. No.
You know, and so, and then I of course I had the people argue with me, say, well, NFPA says you have to have 2 lines flowing 250 gallons. Well, okay. NFPA says I have to have 4 guys on my engine. That doesn't happen. So which ones do we choose from? And but I'm willing to give up 5 or 6 gallons to get that mobility and speed.
Yeah, if your pressure is in the ballpark, like you said, 90 at the outlet, you're going to hit that 240 to 250, 260 all day long.
Oh yeah,
especially with the nicer hose. So it's really a non-issue at this point.
Do you guys see the gauge on the one flow that we were doing in Indianapolis? For everybody out there in the audience, this was one of the skill stations that we had in Indianapolis when we were doing the hands-on training this year. We had the standpipe line, 2-inch line up on the top floor of the Wayne Township Towers. So if you're familiar with it, that's probably the same as the 9th or 10th floor operation. And we had the outlet to the standpipe on the floor below, which is about 20 feet down anyhow. But I was watching that gauge. We were breaking 280 at one time. With the flow of that 2-inch line up there. And again, it's not increasing the weight of the hose, but it's giving you a hell of a lot of firepower.
Yeah.
This is the thing, the people we would love to work with your departments. We can show you the numbers. We can put the hose lines in your hands and so forth, and let you determine for yourself and see for yourself. The 2-inch line, it's a game changer. It really is. And then believe me, I'm an old 2.5-inch guy off the standpipe too. But you got to realize, again, it's a training issue and it's also a strength issue. And it truly is a strength issue because you got a 2.5-inch line that's over pumped just a little bit. It'll throw you around like nothing. Okay. And you won't want to work with it. And that's where the fear comes in. And you can bet, as Chad was saying, a lot of departments stay with the 1 3/4 line because they feel they can control it better. And again, that's why the 2-inch line, especially with the newer materials, allows greater flows at lower pressures. So,
but Jeff, I think the key point here is, and you mentioned it early on, this isn't a house fire. You can't get out of this fire, in 10 feet. You're in the hallway. Maybe you get a wind-driven fire, and now you're in a blowtorch. And if you got an 1 3/4, the experience here in the Northeast has been that ain't going to cut it. That's how guys get killed.
Yeah.
So we were always 2.5 as well, but if we can get that flow out of a 2-inch, we have the advantages of an 1 3/4 mobility, like you said, but you have the greater advantage of having the water. So, I think it's critical that this isn't a house fire. This isn't a regular fire. This is a fire you're pretty much trapped in. And if you don't win the firefight, it's not going to be a good day for you. You're going to get burned. You're going to get killed, So, the other thing I think we mentioned was really critical as well was high flow, low pressure. And we did all the kink testing. The low pressure nozzles and low pressure systems lost less water per kink and per problem in the stretch than did the higher pressures. And the automatic nozzles, fared even worse. They lost significantly more water per, similar kink. So I think it's important, just like Jeff started out saying, this is not a house fire. This is different. You better have a good plan. You better have read these reports, and your plan better be based on learning from those experiences.
Hey, Jer, do you think that what you're saying about the higher pressure lines resulted in greater volume losses at kinks?
Mhm.
What do you think the cause of that?
We're not really sure. Frankly, Jeff, we couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe more turbulence in the line.
Yeah.
I don't know. When
Yeah.
we first did the test, we thought we had bad data, and we replicated it 3 or 4 times and got pretty much the same result. So I wish I had an answer, Jeff.
Yeah. No, but it's something to point out.
Mhm.
Because again, so you got the guy at the top of our screen there telling us about of the 4 cities in their quad areas, 3 of them are still running that system.
Mhm.
So that's critical, I think.
Oh, yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not a house fire. I love
No.
house fires, but it ain't.
Hey, boss, after our class, two other cities put 2-inch hose on it, their engines. They
Oh,
already
really?
had it, but I mean, that way we're at least all
Yeah.
starting with the same stuff.
Yeah.
Right
Hey.
before Jeff retired, we were still using old newspaper bags with 1 3/4 hose, fog nozzle,
Yeah.
and that was about it, right, Jeff? Maybe
Yeah.
a couple,
Yeah.
maybe a couple of tools in there, and that was it.
That's no exaggeration. Somebody got into somebody's ear about, well, we'll just have single roll-ups,
Yeah, they were donut rolls too. They
Yeah.
were very good to deploy in the hallway.
Oh,
What
excellent.
about a
Oh my God.
stairwell?
Yeah, even worse. I mean, but that was the thing you're dealing. So whenever you look to make change, as you guys well know, you're going to have the naysayers. Hey, it's worked so far. What the hell is your problem? What are you upset about? Why do we have to change? Just because you say so? No, it's because, I might know something a little bit more, or you might know something a little bit more, or have a little bit different experience. And that's what you're up against. But I think how many years after I was gone did they finally realize that, that was
Well, we got them. We got the 2-inch right before you retired,
right?
which is great.
And I think we also went to the Denver fold also.
We did Denver fold, 2-inch, smooth bore, piezometer, tools in the bag, like a real kit.
Like a real one.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that fold system. There's obviously there's a lot of different ones out there. Jeff, can you talk about the Denver fold from the old group and how and where it really shines and why it works so well? And
this is kind of funny. So everybody's heard of this Cleveland load. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So this came out a long time ago.
I figured you did.
Oh, don't start, Chad.
Yeah.
That is the urban legend that Shupe started the Cleveland load.
Oh yeah, right. So I started getting phone calls. This is what, early 2000s when that thing came out. Again, it's the power of the computer, YouTube or whatever. You put a pile of shit on the screen, and people say, "Oh my God, look how wonderful that is!" Like, and then they try to do something with it. Well, I started getting phone calls from guys that said, "Hey, I thought you were." This, that, or whatever, and then, most people, or a lot of people anyhow, know Dave McGrail. And he says, "What is this Cleveland load?" I says, "What are you talking about?" And that's how I really came across this. He says, "Well, there's Cleveland loads out there." And then I realized it was a forest firefighting hose load that somebody, once again, take it in their firehouse, throws it on the apparatus floor. Oh, look what we could do with it. And then some departments adapted it. It's like, holy cow. Some of the things that they were doing were so off the chart unsafe.
There
You know,
goes
like
there goes Shupe disowning it already. He doesn't even want to own it anymore.
Are there a lot of forest in Cleveland?
not really. A lot of concrete and asphalt, you
What?
know, and vacant lots.
How did they get the name Cleveland then?
Well, out of Cleveland National Forest in Southern California. That's where it came from the firefighters there. No kidding.
Okay.
No kidding.
And that's
yeah,
where
it-
and
it-
that's where it works exceptionally well. I mean,
It
they-
might out in the middle of a field somewhere where
Yeah.
you can pump it, or like some guys, they put it in a parking lot and they put the water and the pressure to it. You know, look at that, the way it works, and so forth. And we got all our hose there, and I make this on a serious note. I was watching a department one time demonstrate it for standpipe operations, and you should always. And I know that everybody says, "Oh, don't say the word always or never." Yeah, bullshit. You know what? If you have a working fire in a multi-story building and you're operating off a standpipe, you should always hook up to the floor below. I mean, if that becomes a wind-driven fire, if that fire overpowers you and you got to follow that line out, that's your lifeline. You want it to take you out to that stairwell and get your ass below that fire area. Okay, it's just that plain and simple.
It's almost as
See-
if that really happened, and there's a report available that people can read about two
Oh, yeah.
firefighters dying.
That's a good segue.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, what these guys were doing in this one department, they were throwing the Cleveland load right in front of the apartment that was supposed to be on fire and then charging it from there. And it's like, it made no sense at all.
Jeff, was this like the double donut thing?
It looks similar to that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Jerry,
Yeah.
What I've seen is it's a hose just coiled together. So you just start wrapping it and making a circle, and then as it charges, it just,
Yeah.
I don't know, when you said a pile of shit, that's a pretty accurate description of it.
Well, again, that's where somebody takes something and says, hey, let's use it for this or let's use it for that. And we can certainly make it look good. Yeah, you can if there's no fire or smoke in the area. But once we start throwing that stuff or those factors, then all of a sudden it changes very rapidly. Okay. And again, as we tell people, if you're in a deteriorating situation and that fire's coming after you, overpowering your line, and you got to follow your hose line out, that hose line is your lifeline. You want it to take you out to your safe refuge, not out to the hallway where the fire's going to follow you and maybe trap you. So yeah, we went to the Denver load and it made the most sense, especially using the 2-inch line. You know, Dave McGrail and the guys out there in Denver did a great job years ago of determining that fold. And when you take a look at it, if you take it, I think it starts at 32 inches and then you start your folds, 32, 32, 32. You end up with a horseshoe is what it is. And with the 2-inch hose, the 1.5-inch coupling, the weight of that, oh my gosh, it's a beauty. One guy takes one length, takes his can or takes his bottle or whatever else he's required to take with him when he goes in, and you're not beating the guy up with heavier hose. So
Yeah.
one length per man.
It really sits well on an air pack too. That horseshoe.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great system. I mean, we also have the Denver fold, and it packs easy. It unpacks super fast. It's just a winner.
Yeah.
Couplings are easy to identify, and it just works.
We were always using when we were with the 2.5, we had some. They told me it was a modified FDNY. It was basically folded in thirds, stacked next to each other, and that worked if the same person made each pack. And
yeah.
Otherwise, the fold wouldn't be where it was. And so when we went to the 2-inch, I was like, well, this is a perfect time to do the Denver load. And, you know, McGrail has several good videos. I mean, if you don't know how to make it, you can just, watch a YouTube video and he shows it pretty simply.
Yeah.
And then we made our high-rise hose orange, and I took paint and painted the 32-inch mark so you know where to fold. And I made about a 2-foot midpoint where I painted the midpoint where there is no doubt you can see it, so you know where to pull.
Yeah. It works great. I think it's one of those things that is so simple. You're wondering how's anybody not everybody going with it. It's easy to carry. It's easy to pack. It goes in service fast.
Well, one of the things is you can orient, sorry for interrupting, you can orient the bundles very easily. Where, like we said, you want to get three bundles per company. So if you're using 150 feet of hose, you lay the hose lines out or the bundles out. So the coupling from one bundle goes to the next and the next one to the next to where your attack length is. And it's very simple to stretch off from there.
Mm-hmm.
And this hose is very easy to work with too, because it's 2-inch hose.
Yeah.
So
Another question, boss, do you keep your nozzle on the pack or do you keep it in your bag?
No, you keep it on the hose. It's just that simple. Number one,
Just that simple, Jeff.
I was just throwing it out there.
well, a lot of people, why complicate it? Where somebody you could drop the nozzle out, but if it's attached to a hose, you got the hose in the compartment, you go grab it, there it is, ready to go. So, yeah.
Diederich, I don't mean to kid. So if we're using 150 feet, we carry 200 in ours. So we're taking 4 sections up. Is there your flow or below? Depends on if you have scissor stairs. Is there a better way to deploy this in the stairway? Because we're deploying this all in the stairway 9 times out of 10 for us.
Could start it on the floor below.
Yeah.
And
remember,
and then take it up the stairs and
get most of your hose out into the common hallway.
Yeah.
And then, when you orientate your bundles, you should do it, maybe several feet away from that door to the standpipe from the floor below and stretch most of it back into the main hall and bring your nozzle up the stair. There's different ways to skin the cat, but it has to be practiced. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think one of the things for stretching lines in, and this is where we have to realize, keep your hose line straight going to the fire area. You'll minimize the kinks. You'll minimize the pinch points when you can do that. And if things go to hell for you and you got to follow that hose line out, what would you rather follow up? A straight line of hose or a bunch of loops in the hose that have been thrown into the middle of the living room or something like that? So your hose is going to be much more efficient. And again, what's the weight of this? 68 pounds per 50-foot length of 2-inch hose. That's all you're dealing with. So, keep it a straight line going in as much as possible. And that's a management thing for your hose also.
Boss, this is going to be another loaded question for you, but I guess since I have the most standpipes, that's why I'm asking them. If we're hooking up to a standpipe, we have a working fire. We're not going to hook up as we're investigating. Do you deploy the whole thing into the stairwell, or do you, like you said, we don't have the common hallways. Most of the time our standpipes are right off the offices. And I mean, you're in the exit and you're coming out in the hallway where it could be.
First of all, what are we dealing with? An office building or a residential?
Well, most of the residentials, I think our tallest one's 7 stories, but most of our residentials are 5 stories. Anything high rise, with the exception of 3 hotels, are going to be office buildings.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, is that where you look, check, hey, I got a clean hallway, I can go do it, or do we want to go ahead and bleed that out in the stairwell? So we're
if
ready.
You got an obvious working fire, you shouldn't be walking around with a dry line.
No.
It might be clear right now. It may not be clear in 30 seconds.
No, and that's why I was asking. You want to keep everything straight, but we're having to deploy all this hose in the stairwell.
Yeah.
Well, there's stairs going up and there's stairs going down. You can deploy it up and down the steps. So,
well, again, this is okay. So talking about the kind of building that you're in, if it's an office building and you have ceilings overhead, you realize that ceiling is hiding the plenum.
Yeah.
And that's where the fire and the gases can travel to other parts of that floor area. and maybe get into the ductwork, for the return air system or the supply air system of your HVAC equipment. So walking around with a dry line, that is not a smart move, I don't think,
No.
So, and this, by the way, if you're talking an office building fire, again, what we talked about earlier about having 2 engines pump the system, because you are probably, if you have any appreciable fire in a building like that, you're going to be using several hose lines to get into the fire, to take care of lateral or horizontal extension to the floor above or floor below. Like I say, that's the thing about the duct work and these shaftways in buildings like that, So,
And likely that would have a combination system where you would have sprinklers activating and taking water from maybe the standpipe system as well.
Until the sprinklers stop working.
Until they stop working. Yeah.
And
So yeah, if you need all 200 feet of hose, Chad, you're just going to have to find a place to put it.
And that's why I was asking. I mean, y'all have done this more than I have.
Stretch it out on a floor below.
Yeah.
Hook up to the floor below, stretch your hose line out on the floor below, then come back, go up the stairwells to the fire floor. And again, another reason, because you want to find the closest stairwell to the fire.
And the best thing I can hope for is if you have the scissor stairs where it's like go up and up, then that's a floor, they're split.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've done what John said, where I'll take the Denver load and I'll put 2 right by the door and I'll just pull the midpoint straight up and kind of lay them on top of each other. And then they just kind of feed in. And I do have a pinch point right at that door, but that's one guy to manage. It's not that hard.
A lot of variables to deal with.
And that's the thing. I mean, these are not fires, fortunately, that we get to do all the time. So I think, your credit, keeping everything as simple as possible.
Oh, absolutely.
Just
go down to one of these buildings, grab your hose packs, go in with your tools and just do a dry hookup and a dry stretch.
Mm-hmm.
See what it takes. And think about that with that's being done with no fire in the building or no smoke condition. So,
we talked about it, and I know we normally don't talk about truckies, but we do love truck work. Because it does complement us. But the way we've started doing it, our truck company goes up and the engine will actually stay in the lobby until they confirm fire. And that way they control and they say, okay, we've got it. It's up here. You're using this stairway. So we already have eyes on it. That way we don't go up the wrong stairway.
Whatever. If that's a system you have in place and it works for you, why change? Okay. Don't change just for the sake of change or because you heard about this department does it a different way. No, don't. If it works for you, employ it.
I like it. Truckies have to climb the stairs.
As long as they're disciplined enough to not become part of the fire load,
Well, I think the thinking was, what are they going to do when they get there? They're going to isolate the fire, and then they're going to go to that floor above and start evacuating people if there's anybody up there.
No. I don't know if I agree with that. You don't go to the floor above. The people, the old rules, again, this is just the old rules, was that if you have a working fire, the people in the greatest danger are those people in the immediate fire area. Those are the people you want to evacuate out. The fire floor, the floor above, and then the upper floors after that. That should have been the order.
Yeah. Well, I misspoke, because if they see the fire, they're going to get everybody out on that floor. Then they're going up. I misspoke. Okay. I just didn't. They're going to say, "Hey, y'all hang here. The engine company's coming." They're going to get them out, and they'll set, "Hey, we're using south stairwell for evacuation. Y'all use north for fire attack."
Do you guys number stairwells? Do you letter designate stairwells or what?
It depends on what the building gives us. We'll do the A, B, C, D, but a lot of the stairwells are numbered in the building.
Yeah.
And we'll call it out by that number because everybody will see it when they're coming in. And what I've found lucky, and it hadn't happened. I haven't had a big high-rise fire, thank God. But usually these big buildings, I mean, it looks like the building off of Die Hard from a long time ago, where you have building engineers there pretty much all night, and somebody's with that building, and they are very resourceful in helping us access the HVAC system, controlling all that stuff for us. What is it, Nakatomi Tower, I guess. But yeah, I mean, there's like underground, there's whole computers that run the building. So we can actually go down there, look at cameras and see if there's actually a
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah. Jerry, you're Knapp.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm here.
You're muted, Mr. Knapp.
Yeah, I was just laying low, you know.
What's your take on letter designations and so forth, and the command structure and so forth?
Yeah, we don't really get that detailed with I mean, you need to
Yeah.
do that. And I think what Chad was saying before was important as well, is that, and the concept was you got to have a plan, and you were reinforcing that. This isn't a house fire where you're going to grab, you know, your dead load one line, 1 inch and 3/4, you're going to run in. You need a plan. You need to, because if you go into the wrong stairwell and set up your standpipe in the wrong stairwell, you know, you've kind of shot your foot off, you know.
Right.
So I just like to drive home the point that a high-rise fire, it's a different operation, and you got
Right.
to have a plan for it. And like you say, Jeff, the situation, you know, it's situational. You got to do that good size up, because if you screw it up, you got your cannon in the wrong place, you know.
I got one for you guys. Elevator usage. What do you practice? 7 up, 5 below? What's your preference? What do you do?
Well, around me, my
And that's
neighboring,
I'm sorry. That's a historical thing right there, if you want to add that to the mix.
yeah, the 7 up.
I don't know what
And-
that one is.
That'd be if the alarm is 7 floors and up, that you would use the elevator car to go at least to 7 and then walk the rest. 5 below, you walk the whole thing.
Jeff,
no,
you hit your mute button again. Jeff, we can't hear you.
Oh, he's going too.
John, he's talking about 7 up. Is that still the standard there in Cleveland? Is it?
Yeah, it's still our standard.
He's
So
still going.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I knew this was going to happen. Damn it.
So the headphones quit.
batteries
Failed to
ran out.
detect your speaker. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're really loud though.
Back up.
Yeah, I can't hear you guys.
Back away from the speaker a little, Jeff.
How about now?
Yeah, we got you.
We still hear you.
How's my tone? These things went dead.
You're very loud.
Very loud?
He is to me.
Seriously? Oh, okay. Very good. Oh, Jesus. All right. Very good.
Where's the cat? We haven't seen the cat yet, Jeff.
He's hiding behind the board here, the whiteboard.
It really looked like you were going on a rant about the 7 up and 7 before.
5 below, yeah.
Yeah, before we realized you couldn't.
If you have a fire in a building, and let's say it causes water pipes to fail, or you have sprinkler heads that are fused, and you have water going down the elevator shaftway, it screws up the elevators. And you don't know where they're going or what they're doing. There's been all kinds of case studies or case histories of elevators, firemen trapped in them. And I know, I think it was Detroit one year, talked about a fire that they had in a downtown building. Guys were in the elevator car, and the water was coming down, and the water from the fire was boiling hot, and it's coming down the shaftway into the elevator car while the guys are in there, you know, and it was a real mess for a while there. But this is what it can do. And so many departments have said, you know, here's our position on elevators. If we can possibly get away from them, we won't use them. Because if you got a crew of firefighters trapped in an elevator car, you need a crew of firefighters to get them out of that car. And depending on where it is within the fire building and so forth, and it can be a real, and again, it's taking your most critical resource away from the fire, your people. So that's a 7 up or the 5 below or whatever. So
I think the elevator use is kind of one of those things where it's fire department specific, and for years a fire department will get away with using it, sending a reconnaissance crew up to check the floor of alarm real quick, and they get away with it on small smudges or false alarms, but when the real thing is going on, you are literally putting all your eggs in one elevator car, and it's kind of like hooking up on the floor of the fire.
Let me ask you guys this: in your departments, if you had a fire alarm activation on a 6th or 7th floor, and you don't have an elevator SOP or usage SOP, what are you guys going to do?
Oh, we're walking it.
Yeah, walking
Chad?
Walk it.
Everybody says that, but I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to see 4 or 5 guys pile into an elevator car, and they're going to go right to the floor of activation. And that's another thing of history, where firefighters have had those things where, yep, everybody piled into the car, took it right up there, and bingo. They got jammed as soon as those elevator cars opened. There was a working fire, and the hallway was 0 visibility.
You hit door close really quick.
It doesn't always work, especially when the smoke gets into those electric eyes and so forth of the contacts.
You know, and I'm kind of glad you brought this up because, you know, we're talking about standpipes and we're using high rises, but
Changeable.
yeah, it's not.
Whether you're 40 stories above or 5 stories
exactly.
down.
And not everybody has high rises, but everybody does have these new. Most people have these new 5 to 7 story apartment abominations going in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, like you said, we use the term standpipe operations instead of high rise.
Right.
Yeah,
Hey, by the way, you guys still hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. I'll have to charge those things up. So, all right. Okay, Jeffrey.
I was going to ask you if I know you have some reference material in front of you. Some of the other things that guys have put together in the past that we should all pay attention to. Can you grab something right there and introduce it? Or
Sure. I'll tell you what, one of the things that, you know, one of the old definitions of what is a high-rise fire, and this was always the way I was taught, and it was that a high-rise fire is one that is above the height of your fire department's tallest ladder. Okay? Whether you're a small fire department or a big fire department, if the fire is above the height of your tallest ladder, the fire must be fought internally then. And 3, evacuation of the building is impractical. You have yourself a high-rise operation.
there you go.
So it could be a 7 or 8 story fire location, but take what you guys have already said about 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, when you got a lot of people in this place and the hallways and the joint is filling up with smoke from that area. So, Chad?
Hey, boss, real quick. You just brought up something that we haven't touched on, and I've never had to do it, thank God. Protect in place. When you do that, do you know, say we're a fire on 7 and we have a 15-story building and we can't get those people out on the upper floors, do you put a crew with them and just say,
You know, I laugh about it or I smile about it, but have you ever seen the overzealous guys grab somebody who's protected in place and drag him out into the hallway to get him out to the stairwell? And those people are demolished by the time they get down that hallway.
Yeah.
Because they don't have protective gear on. Yeah.
have any of y'all ever had to do that?
Mm-hmm. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Let the people stay in there. They're okay.
Yeah, done the above floor search,
Yeah.
you know, and run into people and
Sure.
tell them to stay in their apartments and
Or they don't want to come out because it's 3 a.m.
Yeah, there's that, but yeah, I mean, most people, I'd like to think, are going to have some type of self-preservation instinct. If they open their apartment door, or they make it to the stairwell and they open the stairwell and that's full of smoke, that maybe they wouldn't even give it a try. But you know, it's circumstantial. You know, if it's not practical to evacuate, you know, multiple floors above the fire out of that building, then yeah, they need to somehow make their way back to their apartment. And if that takes up resources, it does, but you can't let go of the initial operation have to haves, which is getting water where the fire is. And that's where all your resources, your people need to be until that is done. There's going to be plenty of smoke to deal with, but get the fire taken care of first.
Otherwise, it will affect those floors above.
Yeah. Yeah. You've seen some departments get caught up in the minutia. You see it in those 54-page SOPs from a large city, and a suburb's looking at it like, oh, so we got to send somebody to the top of the stairwells to open the hatches. We need to send somebody to the floor above for search and somebody to the top floor to search, and then evacuation stairwells established, and command needs to put their vest on. And listen, just get at least a dozen people together to put water on the fire, get that done, and then move through the building as necessary. I think that try to keep it as efficient and simple as you can.
Sorry, I pigeonholed us there, but
no, I get it. No,
it came up, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. Jeff, you got another piece there for us? What are you doing?
He's drawing.
Yeah, just trying to get this red ink going for us,
Chad distracted him.
All right, you gotta get that whiteboard going. Yeah.
Okay, throw that one out. Okay. Anyway, interesting, because I got this stuff here that it's somewhat old if you're thinking 2004 is way in the past, and it's not. I like to think that this is our time, our history, and so forth. But this is some high-rise stuff, and I think it was put together by Chief Dunn. It might have had some Jerry Tracy addings to it also. But anyways, talked about elevators, and it's talked about in New York City, for example, in an 8-year study of 179 major fires revealed elevators failed at 59 of those 179 fires. So basically a third of the time, elevators were failing. And they go further to say, fire, heat, or water cause electrical malfunctions in the elevators. And at some fires, elevators took firefighters up to the fire floor instead of the floor 2 or more levels below the fire. So again, that's one of the things that, again, that's a historical thing there, that guys, when you start dealing with elevators in a building that's on fire, they could be your worst enemy or your worst nightmare. So, I've heard fire departments say that, if they're going to take an elevator, you better have your mask ready. So yeah. It makes sense, really. So, okay. Geez, you want me to move the computer a little bit closer?
Yeah, if you could tilt your camera down, there you go.
How's that?
So you're showing the whiteboard. Looks like you got a multiple story building.
Let me do this.
Center stairwell with the standpipe.
How's this work?
All right, yeah, you got to tilt your camera up just a little bit. There you go.
Okay. Let me see what we got here. Okay. Yeah, it's a simple sketch. What I've got is about 13 or 14 floors here. If you got a bigger building, just imagine that. And this represents your stairwell here, and here's another stairwell right here. And this is your elevator shaftway right here. So I got your penthouses at the top right here for your stairway and your elevator shaft. The blue pipe here represents the water pipe, the standpipe riser. And we talked about it earlier, where you want this pipe and this pipe to be interconnected by the newer codes they're supposed to be. So somewhere in this building, for a building of that height, you're going to have a fire pump. And the fire department engine, when it arrives, should hook up to the water source down here. So you guys can get that. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, we got it.
So we get a supply line into there, and then we have that engine supply the standpipe. What we should be doing, a building like this, like we talked about already, if we have a Siamese in another part of the building, that's where another engine should be pumped into the system to augment that and guarantee that if that first engine ever fails for whatever reason, water supply, mechanical malfunction, or whatever, you got that second engine guaranteed water going into that building to keep that system going. Okay, so these are the old axioms, that we had in the fire service for this stuff. Okay, so let's just say if I could find a marker that's red and it works like the hydrant, All right, this isn't gonna work. Huh, erasing it. Okay, here's the fire area right here. Okay.
That marker identifies as red.
Thank you. Oh, well. No, we're gonna throw that one out. Hey, here we go. Okay, so that's the area where the fire's at. As we said before, you don't want to make your hookup on the fire floor. You do not. And make that as a matter of principle. You want to hook up to the floor here on the floor below, stretch your hose line out, and then up to the fire area and make your attack from there. And that's a simplistic way of looking at things, but again, one of the things that's going to happen, and that is if you have any smoke condition up there, and it's out of that hallway, out of that apartment and into that hallway, once you open up that door to that floor with the hose line to make the advance, well, the smoke is going to go up here. Smoke and heat are going to go up here, and then what are they going to do? Going to start coming back down. You might end up with smoke coming 1 or 2 floors or 3 floors, depending on the amount of smoke being produced and so forth, until you get ventilation at the top of that shaft wing.
Yeah, it wouldn't be uncommon for that control person that's at the outlet to end up having to put a mask on to continue his job there. Yeah.
Right. See, these are the things, over at FDIC, we did a great job of showing everyone and letting them work with a standpipe. But if you look at the reality of it, those guys were on a platform that was about 15 by 25. We had how many guys there? We could show them they could work with the system. But the reality is, in most cases, you're going to have a very small area in that stairwell. So all the more reason you hook up here, open up that door down on the floor below, stretch your hose line out there, and get that hose back up that stairwell right there. You're not going to have room to play around here, and it's just not going to be a pretty operation. The other thing is, if you follow and read what happened in Philadelphia, total blackout in that building, total blackout conditions because the power went down. And they didn't even have backup generators that worked. And so they were working in zero visibility in those stairwells, humping line in and stuff like that. So that's another point about when you go into a fire, whether it's down here at street level or it's up there, you have your lights, you have your walkie-talkies on, and you work together as a team. I think one of you guys mentioned earlier about company concept. That's how critical it is. So, Jerry, you keep saying, when you were talking about that, it's not like you could go out a window or a door in a house down here. You're up there. You're confined in that whole place right there, so forth. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
One thing I've always told my guys to do that when you're here, I am trying to put my mouse on your hose there. When you pull out and you deploy that hose on the floor below, or most of these apartment buildings have the same layout. So it might be a good idea to get an orientation of what you've got below you, on the floor, you're getting your hose ready before you go up and smoked out.
I don't know that I agree with that anymore.
You don't?
Jerry, have you come across anything like that? It's different.
Yeah, there's so many, in my area, there's so many illegal occupancies.
Yep.
Hell, you could have a SRO, in one of these apartments, 4 single room SROs. I mean, so I think it's something to keep in mind. But again, you know, in the big picture, do you want the guys that are going to make the fire attack to go down and force a door on on another apartment, then run back and get the hose? So it's a very manpower intensive and command and control,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
operation. This isn't grabbing a line and running inside, you know.
I wasn't even taking it that far. I'm just like, look, if you forget everything, you know, it goes back to, like we said at the beginning of the show, you walk your buildings while they're being built, and you know, but if you forget everything, you know, at least I have offices on this side, hotel rooms on this side, or rooms on this side. You can at least get some sort of orientation as to where you're going in case you're smoked out.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, it depends on the situation. It's always something to keep in mind, you know.
Right. Here's another thing. I'll show you. I'm going to put this in here, and somebody's already mentioned it, and that is the combination system. You know, Jeff, John, we worked with that combination system over when we were doing that standpipe class years ago.
Yeah.
And they were afraid by the pressures that we were pumping into to get water into the hose line that we might pop sprinkler heads. If that happens during a fire and the sprinkler heads are popping in areas other than the fire area, you just lost water. You know, you just lost critical water supply, especially if it's a 50-gallon per minute head or something like that. You know, so again, there's just so many variables, and again, how many times do we have to say it that firefighting is circumstantial? We just have to fall back on the basics and the principles of getting water from the hydrant to the engine, into the Siamese, and then into the building from there. So, and the reason we do these things is because number one is history. Number two, we're trying to provide some redundancy. Like the first engine's hooked up to the Siamese with 2 pump operators. After that, we get a second engine to hook into the system. All the while that's going on, we have crews going up. And again, let's just not mark it off here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the 10th floor fire here. What are these guys going to do? Are they going to walk up? You know, what if you pull up and you have an obvious working fire? Are you taking the elevator at that point? No, this is well above, you know, street level. So I think we mentioned when we were out in Indianapolis, those 2 girls who were physiologists, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had the one walk up with me with a hose pack, no turnout gear, no SCBA. And I remember saying to her, you know, the firefighting hasn't even begun, and this isn't even a real fire. This is just playground stuff here. So that's what we're talking about right there. With that, you know, it was a very labor-intensive operation. So, yeah.
I think if you can have your equipment set up correctly and your approach predetermined, you know, you're not going to go up and try and climb those stairs all bundled up. You're going to try and make sure the hoods and the helmets are off. Everybody's sharing the load. You don't have one guy carrying a bundled 150-foot bag of hose, you know, up to the 9th floor. I mean, these are the things that will hurt your operation. You need everybody fresh and ready to go.
Yeah.
So equipment setups are extremely important.
How many departments out there carry the rabbit tool or the hydraulic door opener?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is critical for here to have some tool like that. You know, John, we've had that 10304 miles. Oh my gosh.
Been there a couple times.
People in that one, that would be a standpipe operation. They have doors and sheet metal welded and put over their apartments. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. Oh yeah, they've got grating and so forth, you know, and you can have a fire the other side of it, but it's almost like, wow, look at the forcible entry problem involved here just to get into this joint.
We've actually had a couple fires in that building.
Yeah.
We had them all in a short period of time. We're thinking maybe they shut off their system because it kept malfunctioning. So by the time we got there, it was blowing out the windows, which was interesting for us.
Well, yeah, little misinformation there. So, okay.
Well, I think we covered a lot of the basics here. We got, we talked about having a plan, understanding the manpower and the equipment needs. Talk about some of the nuances with different hose loads, the flows, where we should be. We've talked about some of the historical reasons why we do the things we do. Are we close to wrapping this up? Is there some other things you wanted to throw in there, Jeff?
We're just hitting the basics. We're discussing it tonight. We're not hitting it into any detailed approach.
Yeah.
And strictly from the engine perspective.
Yeah, that's just it. There's a whole nother side of the building with the ventilation and search. Yeah.
Yeah.
And utilities.
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
Well,
Well,
I think we're good.
Yeah, it's looking great. I think that maybe there's a couple things people could take away here, or at least prompt more questions for which we can answer. If people want to reach out to us on our site or contact Jeff, we can continue the conversation individually on some specific needs. Jared, do you want to start us off with the roundup here?
Sure. In my area, we have a big mall. So essentially it's a high-rise building, excuse me, laying on its side. So what a lot of departments here have done is, it has standpipes in it. Again, they don't go up a whole lot of floors. The mall is 3 floors.
Wow.
But you've got a high-rise laying on its side. So we kind of use high-rise tactics, horizontal fashion. So it may be something to think about, for maybe some suburban departments that have that mall or that kind of building. One other quick thought, we have a very old mill complex, about 750,000 square feet. It's just a fireman's death trap. And what we have, it's fully sprinkled. And for the last 45 years that I've been in the fire department, the sprinklers always get the fire. So there's one Siamese for the entire 750,000 square feet.
Wow.
So I used to beat our guys up about feeding the system. And we have decided now not to feed the system because the pipes are 100 years old. And just as Jeff said, talking about blowing the heads, we're afraid of breaking one of the mains, and then we're really in a world of hurt. So that kind of flows in, flies in the face of everything we talk about. But in this case, the situation, it seems like the right thing to do. There is a 1,000-gallon a minute fire pump and a 200,000-gallon elevated tank. So there's pretty good water supply. Again, experience showed the sprinklers get it, So anyway, it was just kind of an oddball situation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Matir, you want to jump in on the conversation here?
Yeah, kind of going over what we were saying earlier. Chad, you were talking about where to put stuff. Know your buildings. I know Jeff, Diederich, I know you guys practice at your buildings, the ones with the weird layouts and stuff like that. Know how much hose you need. Maybe 150 feet isn't enough. Maybe 200 feet isn't enough. I don't know. Know your buildings. Know the flows that you're getting with your water. Just because water's coming out doesn't mean you're doing it right.
Oh, wow, that sounds familiar.
Doesn't it? Know what you're flowing. Yeah. If you're flowing,
Copycat.
exactly. If your flow is what you could get with 1 3/4 inches, why are you taking the bigger line? Take what you need. Take all the water you're gonna need for the fire. Know how much you're actually flowing. And
You want to rephrase that one?
I'm sorry.
Say that again about take what you need, but before that you were saying.
Yeah, I don't know.
Great job, Shupe.
What's that?
Great job. You totally derailed him.
Yeah, you derailed me. I have no idea where I'm at now.
Yeah, yep. Okay. He's gonna blame it on the time because it's 11 o'clock back east, but
Yeah.
we won't accept that.
Chad, what'd you figure out tonight?
I learned a lot. You know, it seems like no matter what you do, when the time comes, I don't think anybody's really prepared for everything. It's going to be a cluster no matter what, no matter how much you practice. And, you know, I'm fortunate Quad Cities, we do have a high rise drill once a year. You know, that's not enough, but be good with the equipment you do have. You know, if you're an engine company, you can go out and hook up standpipes. Like y'all said, do dry stretches in these buildings, in these apartment buildings.
Yeah.
Kind of a good segue for this. We are doing a class in Fort Worth and in October, October 16th and 17th.
Yes, sir.
And day one is going to be our normal class, which is a great class. And day two, we are doing all standpipe operations.
Day one is engine company operations. It is going to be a great class. You're right.
But day two, we're going to do is flow off of standpipes. So anybody in the Texas region, we all have these mid rises coming up. This is the perfect opportunity to practice. You know, I think we're going to be using 2.5 and 2 inch, correct?
Yeah, we're going to make comparisons
to show the difference. You know, so if your department's trying to decide what to use, you know, maybe we can come out and show you something and let y'all pick yourselves. Other than that, I think we're going to be where we're going to be a mile high in 2 weeks, right? 3 weeks?
Yeah, first weekend of October.
3 weeks. It's good to be out and teaching again and flowing again. So if you're in Denver, please look us up.
Yeah, I think in the meantime, if you know, at this point, everybody should be aware of the amount of historical texts that are written about standpipe operations. McGrail, Tracy, Dunn. I mean, they're all there for us, and we should be very familiar with them because why try to reinvent it? I mean, there's been generations of firefighters doing this already. So let's take what history gives us and then make it work for our situation, right, Jeff?
Yeah, you know, there's an old phrase about high-rise operations or standpipe operations. It's low frequency, high risk.
Yeah.
Simple. Yeah.
Very perfect. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for the night. Guys, we always want to say thank you to Fire Engineering for our segment here on Firefighting Fridays. We've gone a bit long here, but that's because tall buildings take a long time to talk about. So a lot of little things to talk about.
Folks out there, look, we haven't even really scratched the surface, you know? We really haven't. One of the things, that I'm thinking about this in closing, like you think about 200 other things too. Depending on your order of arrival at a working standpipe operation, your engine may be parked 100, 200, 300 feet away from this building. And think about that. You're going to be walking that distance with your tank in your back and with your hose pack and with any other air tools like an air bottle or stuff like that before you even get to the building.
And then go up. Yeah.
Yeah. These are different animals that you're dealing with right here. These are the wilds.
They sure are.
Okay. All right. So I'm done talking.
All right, great. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. We hope to see you in Denver here in a couple of weeks. And if we don't catch you there, you can catch us in Fort Worth mid-October. So.
Yes, sir. All right, guys.
All right.
Everybody be safe.
See you later.
Take care.
Take care. Good night.